Kid Cudi gave explosive testimony during the second week of the Diddy trial, detailing his involvement in arson and his alleged threats to kill him. Male sex workers and escorts who attended Diddy's freakoff parties also testified, naming the celebrities they saw. Additionally, the prosecutor's voice recordings and photos directly connected Diddy to these crimes, demonstrating that he was a violent and dangerous man.
Marvel supervillain. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges, and his defense team says any sexual encounters were all consensual. Legal contributor Eric Faddis joins me now for more. So, Eric, what do you think? How does Muscati's testimony impact Combs' arson charges and the racketeering conspiracy counts that he faces, you think?
Yeah, Kira, I think we're firmly moving into RICO territory here. We're getting past some of the sex trafficking allegations, talking about a criminal enterprise that was allegedly engaged in committing crimes. And so Kid Cudi's testimony goes to trying to prove some of those predicate offenses. He says that Diddy and his team burglarized his home after Diddy found out that he was dating Cassie Ventura, and then shortly thereafter, blew up his vehicle, which goes to arson. And so that was really the thrust of the testimony. That was the purpose for putting him on. There were some points scored by defense as well. It was
her testimony. Cassie described how, upon learning that he was seeing Cassie, Diddy had threatened to kidnap her. Kid Cudi's automobile exploded a few days after Cassie warned him that Dottie would follow him. When Kid Cudi arrived on the site, he discovered a Molotov cocktail close to the vehicle that had been dropped inside from the sunroof. Prior to this incident, Dottie had broken into Kid Cudi's home and threatened him.
Committed by Combs during Mescady's brief relationship with Cassie Ventura in 2011, during an apparent breakup between Cassie and Combs.
Kid Cudi had dated Cassie Ventura, and she testified that it made Sean Combs jealous and angry.
Mescady testifying about an alleged break-in at his house in 2011, which he says was Combs showing up when he wasn't home. Mescady testifying that he had a tense phone call with Combs, where Combs insinuates he was at Mescady's home. I said, expletive, you in my house? And he was like, what's up? I was like, expletive, are you in my house? And he said, I just want to talk to you. I was like, I'm on my way over right now. He was like, I'm here. When he arrived, Combs was not there.
But he said Christmas presents he had bought for members of his family were unwrapped, torn open, and his dog was locked in the bathroom.
Mescady says he later called police, who took a report. But the headline moment of this testimony, Mescady describing an alleged 2012 incident where his Porsche 911 convertible had been set on fire. It looks like the top of my Porsche was cut open, and that's where they inserted the Molotov cocktail, Mescady testified. Arson is part of the racketeering conspiracy count Combs faces. Cassie Ventura previously testified that Combs threatened to have Kid Cudi's car blown up.
Kid Cudi's car fire has been talked about for years, but it's significant now because federal prosecutors are trying to convince the jury that Sean Combs used arson as part of a criminal enterprise. That's one of the predicate acts of the racketeering conspiracy charge. Combs denies it.
Combs denies all the charges against him.
Although he was confused about why it would matter if Sean Combs knew that he was dating Cassie, because he had no reason to believe that they were still romantically involved. Remember, Kid Cudi had been dating Cassie, he says, for about a year at this point. He went and he got her from her apartment and he took her to the only place he thought would keep her safe, which is the Sunset Marquis. It's a hotel in LA. So in this phone call with Cassie, she says, look, Diddy knows we're dating. He asked for your address. I gave him your address, and I'm so scared right now. So he goes and he picks her up at her place and takes her to the Sunset Marquis Hotel. While they're there, they got a phone call from a friend of Cassie's who said, I'm sitting in front of your house right now, Kid Cudi. Sean Combs and an associate of his are inside your house. And that's when he was like, what is going on? He said he was angry. So he gets in his car. He said it was a Porsche 911 convertible. And on his way to the house, that's when he's starting to get worried about, what am I walking into? Could Combs have weapons? Who else could be there at the house? Could this turn violent? Although he said he did want to fight Combs for breaking into his house. And so he called 911, but he also called Combs and he said, why are you in my house? And he said, I'm on my way. So when he got to his house, Diddy wasn't there. What he did notice was that his surveillance cameras were turned the other way, some Christmas presents were unwrapped from Chanel for his family, and that also his dog was in a bathroom with the door
The
closed.
fact that Kid Cudi's car exploded days after he threatened to pursue him isn't a coincidence. The only reason he wasn't arrested was because there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime. Prosecutors have released photos from the police's arson investigation, and it is evident that someone cut open the car's sunroof. Kid Cudi even met up with Diddy a few days after the incident.
This week we heard Cassie testify about Combs threatening to set fire to his Porsche. Talk to me about what he said inside today about that incident.
Kid Cudi and Cassie stopped dating after this whole incident in which Combs allegedly broke into his house. So on this particular night, he's staying at an ex-girlfriend's house, and while he's there, early in the morning, he gets a call from his dog's babysitter who's house sitting for him and says, "Your car's on fire in the driveway." So, he instructs her to call 911. The authorities and the fire department show up at his house, and then he calls a friend to go there and start taking pictures of his car. When he gets there, authorities are already at the scene, and what they find is something called a Molotov cocktail. That was a bottle with liquid in it and a rag that had been set on fire, and somebody had cut the roof of his convertible and dropped it inside. And then we saw pictures of all this damage today, and he said that unfortunately his car could not be repaired. So police collected all of this evidence, and there was some sort of an investigation. But today we heard on cross-examination Brian Steele, who's a very famous attorney out of Atlanta who represented Young Thug in his state RICO case. And he got up there and really tried to poke holes in this idea that Combs was the one who destroyed his Porsche. And he said, look, there was an investigation, nobody was charged, and they even took DNA evidence and fingerprints at the scene. And what connects Combs to this incident, right? Because all we really know is that Cassie said that Combs threatened to do this, but there isn't any security footage. There isn't any proof that Combs either told somebody to do it or actually did it himself.
Mescudi says he and Combs met at the Soho House in Los Angeles.
He said he remembered walking into a room with all sorts of glass windows and Sean Combs staring out the window, his hands behind his back, looking like what Kid Cudi called a Marvel supervillain. That earned something of a chuckle inside the courtroom. But he said Combs' demeanor was very calm.
Mescudi said he told Combs that Cassie told him she and Combs were broken up. When the meeting ended, he says, we stood up, shook hands, and as I was shaking his hand, I said, what are we going to do about my car? He looked right back at me, very cold stare, and said, I don't know what you're talking about.
And remember, Cassie Ventura had sent her mom an email just before Christmas in 2011 saying that Combs had threatened to harm both her and Scott Mescudi.
Mescudi testified that Combs basically apologized for everything without admitting any involvement in the firebombing a couple of years later, and that Mescudi had made peace with it. After his testimony, Kid Cudi posting to his Instagram stories.
And I've been seeing...
In addition to bribery and the trafficking of drugs, Combs's indictment now includes alleged arson as a RICO predicate. During Kid Cudi's testimony, jurors were shown pictures of the damage to his Porsche, which showed a 2-foot hole cut in the convertible soft roof, and smoke damage to the car's red interior. Prosecutors must demonstrate that Kid Cudi was involved in multiple crimes in order to prove that his operation falls under a RICO case.
Was ever prosecuted. There's no direct evidence at all linking Sean Combs. And that's a problem. It's enough for the court of public opinion, but it's not enough for a court of law where proof beyond a reasonable doubt is required. Do we think he did it? Heck yes, we think he did it. But I don't know if that's enough to prove arson as one of those crimes that they've alleged was part of his RICO criminal enterprise.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Apart from the fact that he threatened to do it before it was actually done, there's no evidence that he used a staff member or anyone in his enterprise to do that either. I was more interested in the break-in and an assistant named Capricorn Clark, who apparently Kid Cudi said screamed to him on the phone, I was forced into a car and forced to drive with Diddy to your home where I am parked right now, and he is in there in your home right now. To me, that screamed with a receipt almost of forced labor and coercive behavior within your enterprise to commit a crime.
Yeah, it's possible. It's not enough to show he's a really bad guy. It is definitely not enough to show that he is an abuser, which they have proven beyond all doubt. They must show.
Photos from the day of Dottie's arrest were also made public for the first time since the trial began, showing Coombs' hotel room crammed with firearms, bottles of baby oil, and bags of drugs. Homeland Security officials claimed that they discovered $9,000 in cash in Dylan's hotel room, demonstrating that he was having a freakoff session just hours before their arrival.
Inside Combs' Miami mansion, the day federal agents busted the gate open last year to raid it. A federal agent testifying about the evidence, guns and ammo seized from Diddy's home that were found near alleged freakoff supplies, which included dozens of bottles of baby oil and boxes of platform heels, bondage restraints, and bundles of rope. Also photographed as evidence that day, motivational messages on Combs' bathroom mirror that included "You a legend" and "Upward motion," and drugs. Lots of drugs, including ones found in plastic bags inside a Gucci bag, and orange tablets with the Tesla logo that tested positive for ecstasy. Now, Combs has pleaded not guilty to all allegations in this case.
So we just got new exhibits today. Take a look at these photos that prosecutors have just released. They're pictures of Diddy's former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, with what she says are bruises on her back and legs, which you can see here, and also a gash above her eye. Also released today some pictures from when Diddy was arrested in September of last year at the Park Hyatt Hotel in New York. And a special agent with Homeland Security testified last week that some of the items found included baby oil, drugs, these pink packets of ketamine. There's also this image of a knife wedged in a door. Now, Combs, we aren't sure if he's going to be taking a stand in his own defense, but he denies all of the allegations against him. But will all of these witnesses really prove the government's charges that he was running this criminal empire and that he's guilty of trafficking?
With photographic evidence and witness testimony proving that Diddy was involved in these crimes, his lawyers are trying to ask for a mistrial. They claim that Kid Cudi's testimony would poison the jurors against him.
Diddy's lawyer Brian Steele was going to push for a mistrial yesterday during Kid Cudi's testimony. And the reason that he was about to push for a mistrial is because he thought that Kid Cudi was going to say that Diddy unalived people. One of the last questions that was asked to Kid Cudi in his testimony by the government is if he had safety concerns, and this is basically why he left his relationship with Cassie Ventura. Then Diddy's team called for a sidebar where you go up to the judge and you express concerns or issues that you're having. Brian Steele said, "Your Honor, I'm going to move for a mistrial. The government knows the answer that is about to be that Mr. Combs has had other people unalived. This is an outrageous question." And the judge shot back quick and said, "He didn't say that." Then Brian Steele says, "But he will say that." And the judge said, "He hasn't said that." Brian Steele said, "Well, he's about to say it, and I'm putting the court on notice." And the judge went in even harder and said, "No, you don't get to put me on notice. There are no grounds for any application along those lines of a mistrial, because no question that you are talking about has been asked and the answer has not been given." The judge then says, "Now what is your objection to the question that was asked?" Brian Steele says it again, "Why were you scared of Mr. Combs?" And his answer is going to be because Mr. Combs is violent. He had other people unalived. The judge then says his understanding of the things that had happened and his understanding of that event is not a 404A issue, which is what was raised.
His attorneys are attempting to request a mistrial, arguing that Kid Cudi's testimony will sway the jury against him, despite photographic evidence and witness testimony demonstrating that
I believe that that's going to be his answer to why he was scared. I'm preempting it because I know the court if he says it. Basically saying if Kid Cudi said that Diddy had people unalived, that he was going to move for a mistrial. The judge then says, "That's the way you raise the issue? Okay. Yes, I just wanted to give you a preview. Now, what further questions do you have, Ms. Johnson?" And this is the government. "I don't have any further questions on this. I don't believe that that's what he would say. I was specifically directing this to the end of the relationship and his concerns at that time. The judge says, well, to be fair, you asked the question and you got your answer. And Mr. Steele, your point is, let's just move on, right? And Brian Steele says, please. And then the judge said, so let's move on. Nothing ended up coming from it because Kid Cudi did not say that Diddy had anybody unalived. His response to that question was that Diddy.
Brian Steele, Diddy's lawyer, is quoted in the court transcript as saying, "Your Honor, I'm going to move for a mistrial." Steele argues that this is an absurd question because the government knows that the answer will be that Mr. Combs has killed other people. Steele objected because he expected Kai's response to a question about being afraid of Diddy to be in Steele's words, because Mr. Combs is violent and has killed other people, but this didn't.
So he would start to see all of these things take place. He was on direct describing an incident on a private plane between Sean and Cassie, in which he described Sean as holding up like a rocks glass, and heard Cassie then say, isn't someone seeing this, talking about a beating that was taking place right there in the moment. Now, George eventually left because he said he was tired of hiding the domestic violence from everyone. So he's a former executive assistant to Combs, and he testified that he witnessed Combs be violent with Ventura while on that private jet in 2015. He did hear that glass break and saw Combs standing over Ventura. He told the jury that Ventura did scream, isn't anyone seeing this? So that's been some of the testimony. He has testified to several incidents of domestic violence that he saw at the hands of Sean Combs toward Cassie, and then also a name we've heard in this case, Gina. Julie, when Cassie was on the stand, as well as one of her friends, that was Carrie Morgan, she was saying that Gina was a real problem. George Kaplan was talking about some domestic violence that he witnessed toward Gina as well, a time when Sean was throwing apples really hard at Gina, and Gina was covering her face. His abilities increased. He began to set up the hotel rooms. And what did he say that he would use to set up the hotel rooms? He said they would have what was called a hotel bag. Inside that hotel bag would be things like the baby oil, the Astroglide, liquor, drugs, he mentioned. So he mentioned several different items that he would bring in to set up the hotel rooms. He also said that afterwards, what his responsibility was to clean up those hotel rooms after things were taking place behind closed doors. And he said he wanted to do this, put the room back together as perfectly as possible, because he didn't want anyone selling any kind of photographs of the hotel room to try to make Sean Combs look bad.